A rancher, desperate for milk, found an Apache woman. She fed the child and became his family. The rancher lived far from any busy town or crowded place. His small wooden house stood alone on wide open land, where the wind moved freely and the sun rose and set without anyone to watch it but him. Life on the ranch was never easy. Every day began before sunrise and ended long after dark. His hands were rough from years of work, his face marked by sun and dust, and his body tired from carrying the weight of many responsibilities. He had never complained about hard work. In fact, he believed that work was what gave life meaning. Feeding cattle, fixing broken fences, cleaning stalls, and riding long distances were normal parts of his routine. But nothing in his years on the ranch had prepared him for the sudden change that came into his life. One quiet night, his world shifted in a way he never expected. A tragedy struck his home, leaving him alone with a newborn child. The baby was tiny, fragile, and completely dependent. The rancher had held calves and lambs before, but holding a human baby was different. The child felt too small, too soft, and too easy to harm. The rancher was afraid of doing something wrong. Every small cry made his heart race. Every tiny movement made him worry. At first, he tried to stay strong. He told himself that he had survived storms, droughts, and long winters. Surely he could survive this too. But, deep inside, fear slowly grew. The baby needed milk, warmth, and care that the rancher did not know how to provide properly. He did his best warming water, trying to mix what little supplies he had, and rocking the child through long, sleepless nights. The baby cried often. The sound filled the small house and echoed across the empty land. Each cry felt like a call for help that the rancher did not know how to answer. He would walk the floor for hours, holding the child close to his chest, whispering soft words even though he did not know if the baby understood. His voice was rough, but his heart was gentle. Milk became his biggest worry. The small amount he had saved ran out quickly. The nearest settlement was far away, and traveling there took time, energy, and luck. He saddled his horse and rode for hours, hoping to find someone who could help. But winter had been hard on everyone. Supplies were low, and people had their own families to care for. Some wanted to help but had nothing to give. Others simply shook their heads with sad faces. Each time he returned home with empty hands, his chest felt heavier. He looked at the baby and felt a deep sense of fear. He worried about what might happen if he could not find milk soon. He blamed himself, even though the situation was beyond his control. He wondered if he was strong enough, smart enough, or capable enough to raise this child alone in such a harsh place. Nights were the hardest. The house felt colder, quieter, and lonelier. The wind would hit the walls, making the old wood creak. The rancher would sit in a chair near the small fire, holding the baby close to keep the child warm. The baby's tiny fingers sometimes wrapped around his rough finger, and that small touch made his eyes fill with tears. It reminded him how small and helpless this life was, and how much depended on him. He had never been a man who showed much emotion. Life had taught him to stay quiet and strong. But now, when no one was watching, he sometimes closed his eyes and felt tears slide down his face. He was not crying for himself. He was crying for the child, for the future, and for the fear that he might fail. Day after day, the baby grew weaker. The rancher noticed that the child did not cry as loudly as before. At first, he thought it might be a good sign, but soon he realized it was not. The baby was tired. The child's small face looked pale, and the little body felt lighter in his arms. This filled the rancher with panic. One morning, After another long night with almost no sleep, the rancher made a decision. He could not sit and wait anymore. Staying in the same place was not helping. He had to try something different, even if it meant taking risks. He wrapped the baby carefully, made sure the child was as warm as possible, and prepared his horse. He looked out across the land. The hills in the distance seemed far and unknown. He had always avoided certain areas, not because he hated them, but because he did not know what he might find there. Still, desperation pushed him forward. When you are afraid of losing someone you love, fear of the unknown becomes smaller than fear of loss. As he rode, the cold air hit his face, and the sound of hooves on the ground matched the heavy beat of his heart. He kept checking on the baby, looking down to make sure the child was still breathing, still moving. Every small movement brought him a little comfort. Every long moment of stillness made his stomach twist with fear. The land felt quiet, almost too quiet. Birds flew away when he passed. The wind moved through the grass, making soft sounds that reminded him of whispers. He felt like he was being watched, though he could not see anyone. Still, he kept going. Turning back without trying would feel like giving up, and he refused to do that. Inside, his thoughts were full of questions. What if he failed? What if he returned with nothing again? What if the baby did not make it? These thoughts came again and again, but he pushed them away. He focused on one simple goal: find help. Any help. Even the smallest chance was better than none. As the sun climbed higher, his body grew tired, but his mind stayed sharp. He watched the land carefully, looking for any sign of people, smoke, tracks, or movement. He had learned from years on the ranch that small signs could mean big things. A broken branch, a fresh footprint, or a trail in the grass could lead to answers. The baby made a soft sound, barely a cry. The rancher leaned down and spoke gently, even though his voice was dry from worry and tiredness. He promised the child in his own quiet way that he would not give up. He did not know how or when, but he believed that somewhere, somehow, help had to exist. This was no longer just about survival. It was about love, responsibility, and hope. The rancher, a man who had always lived by strength and hard work, now learned that the hardest battles were not fought with tools or muscles, but with the heart. Every mile he rode carried both fear and hope. Fear of what could be lost, and hope that something, or someone, would appear to change their fate. And so, with tired eyes, a heavy heart, and a small life resting against him, the rancher continued forward into the unknown, not knowing that this desperate journey was about to lead him to a moment that would change his life forever. The rancher continued riding slowly, careful not to shake the baby too much. The child was wrapped tightly in a blanket, close to his chest, protected from the cold air. Every few minutes, he looked down to check the baby's face, watching for small signs of movement. Each tiny breath brought him a little relief, but the worry never fully left his mind. The land began to change as he moved farther from his usual paths. The open fields slowly turned into areas with more trees and uneven ground. Rocks appeared along the trail, and the grass grew thicker. The rancher had not ridden this way often. It felt unfamiliar, and that made him both nervous and hopeful. Unfamiliar places sometimes held unfamiliar chances. He slowed his horse near a small stream. The sound of moving water was calming, and he decided to stop for a short rest. His legs were stiff, and his arms ached from holding the baby so carefully. He dismounted slowly, making sure not to wake or disturb the child. The baby's eyes were half open, tired and weak, but still aware. The rancher used his hat to scoop a little water for himself. He did not give any to the baby, knowing it was not what the child needed. As he sat on a rock, he looked around quietly. The trees stood tall and still. Birds moved from branch to branch. Everything looked peaceful, but he could not shake the feeling that he was not alone. Years of living close to nature had taught him to trust his instincts. When something felt different, it usually was. He stood slowly, keeping the baby close, and scanned the area. At first he saw nothing. Then he noticed a small movement between the trees. It was quick, like a shadow, but it was enough to make his heart beat faster. He did not reach for any tool or weapon. His first thought was not about danger, but about help. If someone was nearby, maybe they could guide him, offer supplies, or at least point him in the right direction. He cleared his throat and spoke softly, not wanting to sound threatening. His voice echoed slightly in the quiet space. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rancher began to wonder if he had imagined it. Then, slowly, a figure stepped out from behind the trees. It was a woman. She stood still, watching him carefully. Her posture was calm but alert. She did not look afraid, but she was clearly being cautious. The rancher felt a mix of emotions. Relief came first. Seeing another person after so many lonely miles felt like a small miracle. But there was also uncertainty. They were strangers to each other, from different paths of life. He did not know how she would react to him or to the baby. He raised one hand slightly, showing that he meant no harm. His other arm held the baby close. He spoke slowly, using simple words. He pointed gently to the child and then made a small gesture that showed his worry. Even without perfect communication, his face showed everything. Tired eyes, a worried expression, and a father's fear were easy to understand. The woman looked at the baby. Her eyes softened when she saw the small, weak child. She took a careful step forward, still keeping some distance. Her face showed concern, not fear. She did not rush, but she did not turn away either. That small choice meant more to the rancher than she could know. He slowly uncovered a small part of the blanket so she could see the baby more clearly. The child made a soft sound, barely a cry. The woman leaned her head slightly, listening. She seemed to understand that the baby was in trouble. Her hands moved gently, showing calm and patience. There was a long, quiet moment where neither of them spoke much. Words were not necessary. The situation spoke for itself. A tired man, a weak baby, and a woman who understood what it meant to care for a child. The air between them felt serious, but also filled with a strange sense of connection. The rancher tried to explain about the lack of milk. He made a simple motion with his hand, like pouring, then shook his head to show that there was none left. He touched his chest and then pointed to the baby, trying to show that he was responsible but unable to provide what was needed. His voice broke slightly as he spoke. The woman watched carefully. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she nodded slowly. Her eyes showed understanding. She placed one hand gently on her own chest, then looked at the baby again. It was clear that she knew what the child needed. The rancher's heart beat faster. He did not want to hope too much, but hope was already growing inside him. He had ridden for hours, not knowing if he would find anyone at all. Now, here was someone who seemed to understand his problem. Without needing many words, she motioned for him to wait. Then she stepped back toward the trees, moving slowly and calmly. The rancher felt a moment of fear that she might leave and not return. But something in her body language told him that she was not running away. She was going to do something. While she was gone, the rancher stood still, holding the baby tightly. His mind was full of thoughts. What if this was his only chance? What if she did not come back? What if time ran out? He gently rocked the baby, whispering soft words, trying to keep the child calm. The wind moved through the leaves, making soft sounds. The rancher kept his eyes on the place where the woman had disappeared. He did not move. He did not want to seem impatient or threatening. He wanted to show trust, even though fear still lived in his chest. After what felt like a very long time, the woman returned. She stepped out from the trees again, just as quietly as before. This time, her face looked more certain. She looked at the baby and then at the rancher, as if making a serious decision in her heart. The rancher could not yet know what she was about to offer. He only knew that this moment felt important. His journey, his fear, his long hours of worry had all led to this meeting. A simple chance encounter in a quiet place near a stream had opened a door he never expected to find. He held his breath, not wanting to say or do the wrong thing. The baby shifted slightly in his arms. The woman took another step closer. The space between strangers was growing smaller, and in that space, something new was beginning. Not just a meeting, but the start of a connection that would soon change all of their lives. The woman stood quietly in front of the rancher, her face calm but serious. The air felt heavy with meaning. The rancher could sense that whatever she was about to do was not a small thing. He tightened his hold on the baby slightly, not from fear, but from the deep feeling of responsibility that never left him. She gently pointed to the baby, then to herself, making a simple motion that showed she could help. The rancher's eyes widened just a little. He did not fully understand every gesture, but his heart understood. His shoulders dropped in a small sign of relief. For the first time in many days, he felt that he was not completely alone. Slowly and carefully, the woman stepped closer. The rancher hesitated for just a moment. Trust was not easy for him. Life on the ranch had taught him to be careful, especially with strangers. But when he looked at the baby's weak face, he knew he had no better choice. He nodded slightly, giving his quiet permission. She reached out with gentle hands. Her movements were slow and respectful. She did not rush. She understood that the rancher was giving her something very precious. The baby stirred softly, making a small sound. The woman's face softened even more. She held the baby with the kind of care that only someone experienced with children could give. The rancher watched every movement closely. His heart was full of mixed feelings, fear, hope, gratitude, and worry all at once. He stood close, ready to step in if needed, but also trying not to interfere. He could see that the woman knew what she was doing. Her hands were steady. Her body language was calm. In a quiet, respectful way, she began to care for the child. The details were simple, but the effect was powerful. The baby, who had been weak and restless, slowly became calmer. The crying softened, then stopped. The small body relaxed. The rancher felt his chest tighten with emotion. This was the first real peace he had seen in his child in a long time. Tears filled the rancher's eyes, but he did not wipe them away. He did not feel ashamed. In that moment, he felt something close to a miracle, not a loud or dramatic one, but a quiet human miracle. One person helping another when help was most needed. Time seemed to slow. The sounds of the stream, the wind in the trees, and the soft breathing of the baby filled the space. The rancher realized how tired he truly was. The weight he had been carrying in his heart for days felt just a little lighter. The woman looked at him and gave a small nod, as if to say that the child was safe for now. That simple gesture meant more than 1,000 words. The rancher placed a hand over his chest, a sign of deep thanks. He tried to speak, but his voice came out weak. He had to stop for a moment to steady himself. When he finally spoke, his words were simple. He thanked her as best as he could. He did not know her language, and she did not fully know his. But gratitude is something that can be seen in the eyes and felt in the tone of a voice. She understood. She did not act proud or expect anything in return. Her face showed only calm care and quiet strength. To her, helping a child in need was not something to think twice about. It was simply the right thing to do. After some time, she gently handed the baby back to the rancher. The child looked more peaceful than before. The small face seemed more relaxed. The rancher held the baby close and felt a new kind of hope rise inside him. It was not a big, loud hope. It was quiet and careful, but it was real. He realized that this woman had just saved his child from a very dangerous path. The thought made his hands shake slightly. He looked at her with deep respect. In his mind, she was no longer just a stranger in the woods. She was someone who had stepped into his life at the exact moment he needed help the most. The rancher tried to offer what little he had. He reached into his bag and pulled out some small items: simple food, a cloth, and a few small supplies. They were not much, but they were all he could give. He held them out to her as a sign of thanks. The woman looked at the items, but did not rush to take them. She seemed more focused on the baby than on any reward. After a moment, she accepted a small part, more as a sign of respect than need. It was clear that this was not about trade or payment. It was about kindness and shared humanity. They sat near the stream for a while. The rancher allowed himself to rest for the first time in many days. His body felt heavy, but his heart felt lighter. He watched the woman from time to time, noticing her calm way of moving, her quiet strength, and her careful attention to the world around her. He wondered about her life. Where did she live? Did she have family? What had she seen and experienced? He did not ask these questions out loud, but they lived in his thoughts. He felt that her life and his were very different, yet in this moment, they were connected by something very simple: a child who needed care. The woman, in turn, looked at the rancher with a thoughtful expression. She could see that he was not a careless man. He was tired, worried, and overwhelmed, but he was trying his best. His rough hands and worn clothes told a story of hard work. His eyes told a story of love and fear mixed together. As the sun began to move lower in the sky, the light changed. Shadows grew longer. The rancher knew that night would come soon. He also knew that this help, as important as it was not a one-time need. The baby would need continued care. One moment of help was a blessing, but the future was still uncertain. Still, for the first time since his journey began, he did not feel completely hopeless. He felt that a door had opened. A connection had been made. He did not yet know how, but he believed that this woman might become part of his child's life in a bigger way. As they prepared to move, the rancher looked at her and spoke slowly, trying to make her understand that he was grateful beyond words. He pointed to his home direction and then to the baby, as if to show that this journey was not over. He hoped, without saying it, that she might help again. The woman did not give a clear answer, but her eyes showed thought and care. She looked at the baby one more time, then at the rancher. In that quiet look, there was a feeling of responsibility, as if she already knew that this meeting was not the end, but only the beginning. The rancher mounted his horse slowly, holding the baby close. He looked back once more. The woman stood near the trees, watching them leave. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. His child was alive and stronger than before, because of her. As he rode away, the weight in his chest felt lighter. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but now it was filled with something he had not felt in days: real hope. The days that followed were different from anything the rancher had known before. Even though he returned to his ranch, his mind was still near the stream and the quiet woman who had helped his child. The memory of her calm face and gentle hands stayed with him. Every time he looked at his baby, he remembered that moment and felt both thankful and thoughtful. At home, the baby seemed a little stronger. The child's breathing was steadier, and the cries were softer and less desperate. The rancher noticed these small changes and held on to them with hope. Still, he knew deep inside that one day of help was not enough. The baby needed regular care, and the rancher could not provide everything on his own. He tried again to manage with what little he had. He made long rides to settlements, asked questions, and searched for supplies. Sometimes he found small amounts of what he needed, but never enough to feel safe. Each ride took time and energy, and each return home came with worry. The land was large, and help was far away. Often at night, he sat near the small fire, holding the baby and thinking. The flames would move softly, and the shadows on the walls would dance. In those quiet moments, his thoughts returned to the woman. He wondered if she was safe. He wondered if she thought about the child too. He did not know why, but he felt that their lives were now connected in a way he could not easily explain. After a few days, he made a choice. He could not just wait and hope. He needed to try to find her again. It was not an easy decision. The land near the stream was not close, and the paths were not clear, but his heart told him that this was the right thing to do. He prepared carefully. He wrapped the baby warmly, packed what little supplies he had, and saddled his horse. This time he was not riding only out of fear. He was riding with a small but strong sense of purpose. He wanted to see if the woman would help again. More than that, he wanted to build some kind of understanding between them. The ride felt long, but his mind stayed focused. He followed the path he remembered, watching for the same landmarks: the bend in the stream, the cluster of trees, the rocky ground. Each familiar sign made his heart beat a little faster. He felt nervous, not knowing if she would be there or if he would find only silence. When he reached the area, he stopped and looked around quietly. The place looked the same: peaceful, quiet, and still. For a moment, disappointment touched his heart. He wondered if he had come for nothing. Then he noticed movement again, small and careful, just like before. The woman stepped out from the trees, just as she had on their first meeting. The rancher felt a deep sense of relief. He did not smile widely, but his eyes showed his feelings. He nodded gently, showing respect and gratitude. This time there was less fear between them. They were still strangers, but not completely. They had shared something important already. The baby made a small sound, and the woman looked at the child with recognition. It was clear that she remembered. Once again, she helped with calm and care. The baby grew peaceful, and the rancher felt that same deep gratitude rise in his chest. But this time, something else happened too. The woman stayed longer. She did not rush away. She sat nearby and watched the baby, then looked at the rancher, as if studying him. Slowly, in simple ways, they began to understand each other better. They used small gestures, simple words, and patient expressions. The rancher showed her where he lived by pointing toward the open land. He showed her his hands, rough and worn, to explain his hard work. He pointed to his chest and then to the baby, showing that he was the father and that this child was his responsibility. The woman listened and watched carefully. She seemed to understand more than he expected. She showed him small ways to care for the baby, how to hold the child, how to keep the baby calm, how to notice signs of hunger or tiredness. These small lessons were very important. The rancher paid close attention. He wanted to learn everything he could. Over time, this pattern continued. The rancher returned more than once. Each visit felt a little easier. Trust grew slowly, like a small plant pushing through hard ground. The woman began to see that the rancher was serious about caring for his child. The rancher began to see that the woman truly cared, not just for the baby, but for their shared situation. The baby grew stronger with each visit. The child's cries became louder and healthier. The small body gained a little more strength. These changes filled the rancher with hope. He felt like he was watching life return to his child, little by little. At the ranch, life also began to change. The rancher became more gentle in his daily routine. He planned his work around the baby's needs. He spoke softly, more often. He learned patience in ways he never had before. The hard, lonely life he once lived was slowly becoming a life centered around care and protection. Sometimes the woman came closer to the ranch area. She did not enter the home at first, but she came near enough that the rancher could see her from a distance. This was a big step. It showed growing trust on her side, too. She was stepping into his world, just as he had stepped into hers. They saw that he was more tired but also more focused. They noticed that he talked less about cattle and more about his child. But some offered small help. Some only watched quietly. But everyone could see that his life had taken a new direction. The woman was no longer just a helper who appeared once. She was becoming a regular part of the child's survival. In the rancher's heart, her role grew larger. He did not yet use the word family in his mind, but the feeling was moving in that direction. There were still worries. There were still nights when the baby cried, and the rancher felt afraid. There were still days when supplies were low. But now he did not face these fears completely alone. There was someone who understood, someone who cared, someone who had already proven her kindness with action. As weeks passed, the connection became stronger. The rancher and the woman did not share the same background, the same life, or the same past, but they shared a present that mattered deeply, a child who needed both of them in different ways. In quiet moments, the rancher sometimes looked at his baby and imagined a future that was not full of fear. He imagined the child growing, walking, laughing, and learning.